Welcome to this webinar. And good morning to those of you who are here yet again for the series that we're running here at Cambridge Marketing College, this personal and professional development series. I hope if you've been attending lots of the other sessions that we've had on this fortnightly series, you've been really enjoying it and finding lots of benefit. If you're the first time here, this is a series that we are running of some quite, I guess you could call them quite eclectic subjects, where we are covering a whole host of things that are, currently very much in vogue and really important to developing your marketing and professional career more broadly. I know for a fact, with all the feedback that we're getting, that we have a lot of marketers on these sessions, but also people from other disciplines who I'm guessing are quite curious about what we marketers do. So welcome back if this is not your first time, and it's great to see you if this is the first session that you've been involved in. Now, what's been going on? Well, we've been covering a host of topics from communication and presentation skills. We've looked at things like negotiation and persuasion. I'm just checking the list here. Thought leadership, that was a really interesting one and certainly a pet topic of mine. Networking and professionalism in marketing. And coming out of the back end of the professionalism in marketing that we covered a couple of weeks ago were a number of topics which have really led us into the session here today. The topic in question here is agility, flexibility, and creativity. And I've got a lot of ideas and thinking to share with you as we go through this session. And this one will be followed up on the 1st of October by something that we're calling commercial thinking. As you'll see when we get to the end of this one, I'm thinking actually of changing the title of that to commercial feeling. And you'll probably see the gist of why I'm possibly thinking that might be more appropriate as we get to the end of this particular session. And then as we go deeper into the autumn or the fall, if you're watching from elsewhere in the world, we call it the autumn here in the UK, we are going to be covering topics such as emotional intelligence and empathy. It's all very well having the technical skills, but if you're not able to relate fully and really understand the people you're trying to communicate with, it's going to be a tough ask and a tough challenge for you. So we're going to get some deeper into some more psychological processes of personal and professional development. For me, it's a really exciting and interesting series, this one, because we're taking all sorts of different perspectives, bringing in all sorts of different thinking from different areas of the world and of business, and trying to sort of meld these together in this great big melting pot of ideas, which hopefully you're finding really, really useful. As always, I will present some ideas and some topics here over the next half an hour to 40 minutes or so. And then Lauren will be hosting the chat that we have. So if you have any questions, any burning thoughts, or if you disagree with anything that I'm going to be talking about as we go through this, and please feel free to disagree. I'm not here to say there is only one size fits all. In fact, far from it. There are many, many ways to approach this particular topic that we're covering here today. So if you have anything you'd like to either ask or cover, feel free to use the chat facility, and I'd be very happy to answer with my perspective on things, and or maybe come back to you if there's a question that I'm not able to cover in this session. So yeah, feel free to use the chat button on the menu structure here on Zoom as we go through this particular session. Okay, so why are we here today? What is it that we are trying to focus on as we start to develop this whole idea of being more agile, being more flexible, and having a little bit more creativity in our professional life? Well, to me, one of the big challenges that I think a lot of us have faced is that we have, over the last couple of years, as we've been going through a host of changes, a host of chaotic things that we've encountered, is that we've actually been limiting ourselves. So we've become less agile, actually, when we've really needed it. We've become less flexible and definitely less creative. I think, if I take a straw poll across a whole range of different industries and people that I'm connected with, we really are seeing survival as being the constant, I think, throughout all these changes. And I think really from my perspective is we've become less agile, flexible and creative because we've been asking the wrong questions. We've come from a starting point of trying to get back to what we call normal. There is no normal. You know, we are in a constant flux and ebbing and flowing of a situation here. Nobody really knows where we're headed, to be truthful. You know, the whole word strategy, that view of the distant future. Well, strategy is now this year. You know, can you cope and survive this year long enough to still be in business and to still be in your role, to be able to then move into future years? It is challenging out there right now. And so once we start to accept that we do live in this world of constant change and evolution, then we're starting to be able to ask the right questions of ourselves, of our colleagues, of our peers, of our businesses, to be able to at least get some semblance of order, to be able to become more agile, flexible, and creative. And that's really what I'm here to do in this session here today, is to kind of explore some of these ways that we might be able to take it back and maybe a little bit more control over the chaos that we've had in recent times. So for me, this is the moment really as we emerge from a lot of these kind of restrictions, both within our market sectors and within the sort of the political framework that we're all living, irrespective of where we are in the world. We can now take this opportunity to innovate, to reinvent and potentially co-create. And that's a word I want to explore with you a little bit later. We've often heard this word pivot, and a lot of organizations, and we've covered this in previous webinars as well, a lot of organizations are starting to introduce this idea of being able to pivot. In other words, you know, not necessarily doing what we've always done, but maybe focusing on some new areas and some new opportunities to kind of open up a new way of doing business, to open up new relationships, to maybe reinvent ourselves. And so this allows us to explore concepts of co-creation, of collaboration, true collaboration, not thinking of ourselves as little entities who are just trying to survive, but actually working with partners, working with other organizations and other professionals to really move the game forward and to allow ourselves to rethink what we previously perceived as being business as usual. So what I'd challenge you to do, and what I'd really encourage you, in fact, actually, what I'm going to implore you to do is to take the word busy out of your equation, out of your vocabulary. Take the word normal and take the phrase business as usual out of your vocabulary. Test yourself, maybe just today or maybe over the next week or so. Test yourself and see whether or not you can actually do business, whether or not you can operate in the world without using those three words: busy, without using the word normal, and without using the phrase business as usual. Because as soon as you do, you're then going to start to open up the opportunity to ask the right questions. You're going to put yourself and those around you in a slightly different mindset, which is going to allow you to begin to make different decisions, to begin to open up new things that you can converse about and new opportunities. Because let's face it, really, if we stop and think about this just for a moment, you know, we can't become more agile unless we know where we're starting from. We can't be more flexible unless we open up to creating a framework and an environment around us that allows us to be more flexible. And we can't be more creative by just doing the same old thing every day. Okay, so something has to give, something has to change. And for me, the first thing that needs to change is that we need to really understand that every single decision, every single thought process that we have in business, in our business, is going to have a consequence. In your life, every single decision that you make, even the smallest decisions, has a consequence. It changes everything. It changes the direction of travel. It changes what you have or don't have. It changes who you're going to spend time with. It changes how you're going to use time. So everything that you decide has a consequence. And if you think about it, your business is a consequence of all the decisions that have ever been made about and within it. Just think about that just for a moment. Every single decision that's ever been made has shaped up where you're sitting and what you're sitting in and within today. And for every single decision, there's a consequence. Okay, so again, think about that. So even the smallest of decisions has a consequence. It might be a small consequence, but it changes everything. So if we decide to remain in the normal, that business as usual, that stuff that we're not going to talk about again, then what we're doing is we're going to just, in theory, remain the same as the world moves on around us. So we can't become more flexible, agile, and creative unless we actually commit to change. Unless we really understand that we're going to be starting to make some decisions that we know have consequences. And not all those consequences are going to be positive. Some will be neutral and some will be challenging or negative, but that's okay once we accept that every decision has a consequence. Because if we then decide, okay, we're going to make some decisions going forward here that will make us more agile, flexible, and creative, and those things will have a consequence on our organization, we're starting to take accountability and responsibility for everything we think about professionally and personally within our work. And of course, this does have a spin-off benefit, I would say, in your personal life as well. But for today, we're just going to really focus on your professional life. So this is all about starting from a point of a little bit of control. But it isn't all about you, but it kind of is all about you. And I'll come on to kind of how we can balance that as we go through this. Now, let's kind of get some reality in here. You know, I'm a positive person, and I'm sure a lot of you listening to this are also positive people. But let's face it, humans, and again, according to the psychologist and author Robert Holden, who has done a lot of research, a lot of writing, a lot of thinking about this, humans naturally have what is called a negativity bias. So you might have a desire to be more agile, flexible, and creative, and come up with amazing new ideas and innovate and pivot and, you know, open up opportunities for your business. But actually, innately, you, even if you're a positive person, have a negativity bias. Now, what that means is you are going to, because of fear, because of protecting yourself against risk, you are going to be restricting and holding yourself back. It's what we do as human beings. It's how we are programmed, okay? So the starting point, and this is the very, very, very baseline starting point for agility, flexibility, and creativity, is to admit, I am lost, I need help, because that empties your ego. One of the biggest challenges we have when we want to become more agile and flexible and creative is that our ego steps in. It controls our conscious thought. And with this negativity bias, it starts giving us reasons why we can't do stuff. Yeah, I want to be super creative. I want to come up with all these lovely innovative ideas, but it's too expensive. Can't do it because it didn't work before. Oh yeah, I'll listen to my colleague over there who tells me that's never going to work. And so what we do is we are just naturally biased to shoot ourselves in the foot, to use a very common British phrase. We talk ourselves out of it because that's how we're programmed. Negativity bias is programmed in our DNA. And this is a prehistoric thing. It's programmed in there to protect us. So flexibility and creativity and being more agile is not a natural thing that we can and should be doing according to our programming. But we can, because if we admit for a minute that we are only human, that we're a little bit lost, we need a little bit of help, we start to ease off, take our foot off the gas for a moment and empty our ego of all those reasons, all that back chatter, all that monkey mind, as it's called in psychology circles, that kind of chatter that goes on, trying to convince you not to do something, and allows ourselves to open up to maybe subconscious processes that are going on deep inside us that allow us to maybe, just maybe, open the door to new thinking and new opportunity. So let's think about some of these opportunities and start to introduce a few little ideas for you to think about as to kind of how you can do this. If you say, right, I really want to do this thing, I really want to be a bit more agile, a little bit more fleet of foot, maybe a little bit more responsive, thinking about some kind of flexible working and creativity in my processes and the things I bring to market and my marketing communications. It can apply everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you now about 3 ways that you can start to seek these new opportunities. If we admit we need a little bit of help here, you know, we need to change, we need to break out from the, and I'm going to use the word, I'll do this just to kind of, don't know, cheat a little bit, but the normal. So we're going to do things a little bit differently. So how can we do it? Well, we need to look beyond the stuff that we've always done. And typically as marketers, we've focused on what we call core competencies, our USPs, our unique selling propositions. We've covered these in the previous webinars. We know they're good for us. but they're also limiters in terms of creativity. We also need to find and live by a higher purpose, a reason beyond our products and services that gives us an opportunity to seek out new ways of doing new things, to serve new people in new markets, and maybe be doing stuff that we actually even love more than we do right now. And let's see if we can also reimagine stuff within the marketing mix. The marketing mix is now this kind of over sort of dominant, omnipresent thing that controls our every waking moment in marketing. But is there stuff in there that we can reimagine? And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that word reimagine in a moment, because it is a new way of thinking about what we could be doing. So let's take the first one, looking beyond our core competencies. So those core competencies are USPs, unique selling propositions, what we do differently and better than everybody else. And you can do this personally. There's, some unique core competencies that you have as an individual that those around you don't share. You're going to be offering those up to the world because they're the things that differentiate you from the others, and you can add some really, really strong value. But for you and for you as a business, what other things are you capable of doing? Not necessarily things that you're better than the rest at doing, but what other things are you capable of doing? Within those capabilities, are there some opportunities now in this new, ever-changing, constantly evolving world that suddenly, if you were to devote the time to them, might open up opportunities to spend a little bit more time with them to turn them into competencies? In other words, take things that you can do and actually see whether or not, if you were to grow, learn more, do a deeper dive into them, could you reinvent some of those as something that would add some really pure value to the world around you? Once you start listing these out, and I mean, really, really do list them out, get the Post-it notes out, get the flip charts out, and just brain dump all these ideas out. What are things that you could do? Don't be limited. Don't be thinking things you can't do, limited by time and budget and effort. Forget all of that. Just list the capabilities that you have personally or as a business. And then apply the must, should, could filter. In other words, put each and every one into a pot. The must, explore further pot. The should, explore further pot. And the could, explore further pot. Those in the must pot are the ones you're going to focus on, because those are the ones that you must pay a little bit more attention to. And notice in that pot, as you start to explore whether any of those might turn into core competencies, you might be able to empower them. You might be able to devote some resources to them, to maybe boost them out a little bit. Maybe we'll make them rise higher. See how that makes you feel as you look at each one, not what you think about it, but how do those make you feel? Because feeling here is super important. There's a very, very, very big difference between thinking about something and feeling it. Try and take your mind out of it. Just feel in your gut or in your heart that capability that seems to be shouting out to you, so that you intuitively think, that's the one. I haven't thought about that in a long, long time. But I wonder if, what if? And just allow yourself to dwell and almost kind of bask in that opportunity just for a moment. And it's the ones in the must category, the ones that really do grab your attention, and see how those make you feel. That could open up a little opportunity to just do something slightly differently. Second thing that you can do to make yourself feel that you're kind of engaging a little bit with some opportunities is to think about your higher purpose. Why you're here, really. And it isn't to develop a new product or service. It isn't to do that next great social media post. It isn't to do whatever your boss or line manager asks you to do. It isn't to jump every time your customer or client asks you for something. There's something deeper, more profound within your organization, and probably within you personally. And we call this the higher purpose. When we look at a sort of an entrepreneurial situation, of course, let's face it, who doesn't want to live an entrepreneurial style life, doing what they love, adding value to the world, being rewarded for it? This sounds like a really great thing, but most of us spend our time doing stuff that we're rewarded for and probably quite good at. But that isn't probably quite enough. So what we're looking to do is to really find that sweet spot. You'll know if you've come on my previous sessions that I talk about this word ikigai. Search out ikigai and put Neil Wilkins against it, and you'll see there's a lot of kind of information out there if you Google that. But for me, this higher purpose, this way of finding new opportunities, is to spend a little bit of time figuring out what you're good at. So this is you personally, but also you as an organization. What are you good at? What could you actually be rewarded for? What are the things within that good at pot that you could actually be rewarded for? And think about reward in its broadest sense, not just reward financially, but reward as in the feel-good factor, reward as in the testimonials, reward as in the you decide. Also, what are the things in there that the world needs? So what are you good at that you can be rewarded for, that the world actually needs and would value? And when I say the world, it's the world rather around you, okay? The world that you can touch, the world that you can connect with. And it might be a new world. There might be a new sector or a new country or a new territory that you need to go to here to satisfy this value. But go and have a little play, see where this takes you. And of course, out of all of the things that come out, and these are the ones that are going to be in that must category, is which ones there also you tick the box of you'd love to do, you'd love to be part of, you'd love, not like. Facebook has created like as being the new neutral. We know that. It's not enough. We want to love. So which are the things that make you really lift and you get a real feeling of almost empowerment and excitement? Somebody talked to me the other day and said, you know, these are the things that make my eyes sparkle. And I thought, oh, that's nice. This is what we're after here. This is where flexibility and creativity truly come from. What are the things here that you love that also make your eyes sparkle? Because that's loving, but at the next level up. So this is what we're trying to do. And your higher purpose is that very thing. It's that entity, that thing in the middle that's going to drive your every waking moment. It's right at the start. The word is ikigai, and Lauren has put into the chat the spelling of the word, so you've got to be careful how you spell it. But if you do ikigai, Neil Wilkins, then you'll find the stuff that I've written about on that subject. It's fascinating stuff, and it is one of those key pillars that starts you off on this whole flexibility and creativity journey. And as I've said, you know, you can start this point from anywhere in your marketing mix. And the word reimagine, I just have found this fascinating. Apple have really used this over the years as being, you know, the way that they bring new product and service to market. They reimagine how we as consumers use what they provide. And it is fascinating stuff. It is just the way of taking away those boundaries, those limitations. This is what we need to do. This is taking out time, taking out money, taking out expense, taking out commitment, just saying, what if? What if I could? What if there were no limits? Let's reimagine how we do that, how we talk to that customer, how we provide this service, reimagining. And it comes at any point in your marketing mix. Yes, it could be the higher purpose, but it could also come from things like your processes. You could reimagine your process or your customer journey. What would happen if? How exciting might that be? These are the baseline points where agility, flexibility, and creativity begin. And of course, what we're looking for here, really, if we're thinking about it, is kind of working together. This is very unlikely to come from the little ivory tower that is you, that little world, that little sort of cocooned individual in the world who's trying to protect themselves and survive. The best and most agile organizations collaborate and co-create. The best, most flexible and creative organizations and people collaborate and co-create. This is what makes for more effective innovation. Whilst I've said right at the start here that it starts with you, the accountability and responsibility for agility, flexibility, and creativity is starting with you. And it doesn't matter whether you're not the leader in the organization. You could be the most junior person in the organization. It still starts with you. Because if you don't start this, maybe nobody else is going to. And of course, what a shame that would be. So take this ownership and responsibility, because just a little micro change in what you do will, I promise you, have a knock-on effect to everybody around you. People will start to get more impassioned. They'll start to get more engaged. And then exciting, innovative things begin to happen. And they happen around these two words, which I want to explore now: collaboration and co-creation. So collaboration is clearly working with named and defined suitable others. And co-creation is actually creating stuff together and releasing. And again, this is where you've got to take your ego out of it. This is not all about you. It's significantly about you, but it's not all about you. And most businesses that I've encountered have a real problem with this, because they've been trained over the years to have a super ego, to feel that they're really important and really valuable to the world. Co-creation comes when you take your foot off the gas of that ego and say, hey, we're just part of a bigger machine. We're just part of an ecosystem. I've used the word just there quite guidedly because you're still important, but you are just part of a collaborative ecosystem. Once you do that, then it will amaze you how many people then will kind of rise up and say, we'd like to work with you. Can we have a meeting? Can we do a Zoom call? Can we start to explore some ideas? If you're sat there thinking that you are valuable to the world, but you're not doing anything about it, then I can tell you you're not. But if you start to then open the doors and say, we want to actually co-create, we want to work with like-minded others to see if we can actually adapt and change something and actually have a really clear focus on improvement, maybe all working to a higher purpose. And it could be sustainability and green stuff and all that lovely stuff that we're all talking about right now. But it might be something very, very local. But co-creation really, I think, for most organizations and individuals, comes from a true, authentic and open collaboration. So we've got to open the doors up here. This is where it begins. So true collaboration, and here's just a nice set of definitions from it, comes from openness and transparency. So first of all, we've got to step out of ourselves. We've got to stop thinking that we are just the best thing ever, okay? We've got to humble up, really. This is where collaboration comes from. We've got to stop judging, okay? Every idea is a potential success. Okay, stop knocking good ideas down. Stop knocking bad ideas down, because from every bad idea comes an opportunity, and I'll tell you how you do that in a moment. We need to create an idea sharing culture, because from within an idea, that idea came from the sum of other parts that came from somewhere else. And maybe just one of those little parts in what could seemingly be a bit of a crazy idea, maybe one little part that went into that idea is your next big win. So there is no such thing as a bad idea. So let's start to create cultures and teams and ways of working that celebrate new ideas. Let's encourage collaboration across departments. If you work in a silo and you are in an organization where everybody kind of folds their arms and says, I'm not going to deal with you because, one, I don't really trust you. Two, well, it's not my responsibility. It's not my job. You need to get out. You need to get to somewhere where cross-department, cross-team collaboration is the norm. It's a really, really powerful way of becoming more agile and creative, and we'll see that a little bit later. We need to also be encouraging to lead from the top down. I've got a simple single tool. If you are in a management role, okay, so I'm talking to the leaders here now. So for those of you in a leadership role, you're working from the wrong perspective, okay? This is not top down. This is not about delegation. This is not about you own the narrative and you're going to disseminate it. Those days are gone, okay? That was the old model of successful collaboration, flexibility, and creativity. You now as a leader work below your team and your staff, those people who are customer facing and really kind of know what's going on, and you should be supporting them. So flip that business structure on its head. You as a leader are sitting beneath your team and you're supporting those above you to do this stuff, okay? So again, get the ego out of the way, things and magic start to happen. Offer positivity and rewards. Anybody who comes up with a good idea, get them a reward. This is so important. Incentivize positivity, incentivize idea generation, and have the right technologies in place. It doesn't have to cost a lot. There are simple collaboration tools. We're all using them, and anything from, a private Facebook group to Slack to a WhatsApp channel. We can just use these simple technologies for free to truly collaborate. So why aren't we doing it? Because we use that banned word. Remember that word, busy? As soon as you take that word out of the mix, you've got time for this. It's all about prioritizing this as an investment in your business. So once we're beginning to collaborate, once we're starting to get that communication going, what happens next? Well, then we can focus on this word co-creation. Okay, so the most agile, flexible, and creative organizations and people begin from a point where they seek joint ownership of ideas. No one person takes the credit for an idea in a co-created environment. This is where the real fun begins, okay? This is the key. If there's one thing you're going to take away from this webinar, this potentially is that thing, okay? It's those words, joint ownership. Everybody has to feel part of the debate. Everyone has to feel an accountability and a responsibility for what came out and what's going to happen next. And joint ownership, and this is not about the company owner owns the IP. This is not about nobody junior can't figure out how to work this thing. This is everybody involved jointly owns the idea. And then the magic happens, because you will find that innovation is just propelled, as if by magic across the organization. The culture changes as soon as you allow joint ownership. So try it, do it at a little local level, see whether you can actually give people credit. That's the starting point, credit for these new ideas and these innovations, and for spending maybe a lunchtime together. And it can even be on Zoom, not all of us are back in the office right now. So figure out ways of having these conversations to come up with some ideas and some innovation to maybe solve a problem or a challenge, and make sure that everybody has the ownership of the ideas that come out. Even the person who came up with the original idea has to share and disseminate that ownership, because that is the key to co-creation. And that's really the key to keeping the momentum of this thing going. So how do you improve those collaboration skills? All very well me sitting here in my little office just chatting to you about this stuff, but how are you actually going to do this thing? Well, there's a number of things that you can do. The first thing is to set some clear goals and objectives. So if it is that next lunchtime meeting where you actually want to get a few people onto Zoom to solve a problem, but you want to do it flexibly and creatively, set some clear goals and objectives and communicate clearly your intentions. Tell them this is what you're trying to do. Tell them, look, you want to come up with some new ideas, innovate a little bit. You want to be a little bit more flexible and creative. And you want to break away from doing it the same old way, and then be open and willing to learn in this whole idea of compromise and sharing. Okay, make sure that nobody is feeling that they're going to be blamed or that they're going to be sort of shot down if they come up with that crazy idea. We talked about that. So be really open-minded. Embrace that change, embrace those differences, if you like, and particularly inviting people outside of marketing. If you live in marketing, get some people outside of marketing, because they will challenge what you do and welcome the challenge. Okay, celebrating the collaboration at the end of each and every session you have is also really important. Not only the success, but also just the celebration of actually working together and working collaboratively. And people will know. They'll know that this is a good place and a good thing to do. And it will be refreshing, and it will be a slightly different perspective on the old challenges that you've always had. So there are three things you can do actually in those meetings. Okay, so and I'm gonna call it actually creating a flexible and creative culture. Now, culture is often sort of described as something that applies right across the organization, but for here now, right here, right now, let's start small. Maybe you have a certain culture in the meetings that you call. Okay, they could be team meetings, they could be these broader collaborative meetings. Set your own culture. It's got to be within the brand guidelines that your organization has. Don't go flying off, kind of left field doing something completely different, but within there, have sort of set the guidelines or the boundaries for a flexible, creative culture, so that you personally, when you arrange a meeting, you get identified as, oh, it's one of Neil's meetings. Great. I know the style of those meetings. I'm ready to enjoy this. So how do you do that? Well, you ask rhetorical questions, questions that are thought-provoking, but that don't necessarily provoke an answer. Okay, they don't necessarily seek an answer there in the moment, but they get people thinking. So rhetorical questions will be something I'll explore in 2 webinars time when we look at empathy, because empathy is really one of those really sort of key things in terms of understanding the perspective of the other And rhetorical questions can really kind of get you connected on a like-for-like basis. So look up rhetorical questions if you don't know what those are now in the meantime, because asking rhetorical questions, those questions that don't need an immediate answer, can often be a great thought-provoking way of creating this kind of really creative sort of thought-inspiring culture within the meetings that you're holding. Create multidisciplinary co-working. In other words, as you come out of these meetings, or I mean, ideally, if you can, and I've seen so many great examples of organizations who have co-working spaces. They don't have the marketing team sits there, the finance team sits there, HR sits downstairs, management sits upstairs. It's co-working, multidisciplinary people working in a shared space. And of course, now a lot of us are working digitally. There is no reason why you cannot co-create and co-work. I've seen organizations even have Zoom calls where people are just getting on with their day job, but they've got their team and co-workers actually on screen at the same time. So they feel connected. This is how to create this creative culture. And also, and I've just touched on this a few moments ago, embracing the what if. Dare to dream was the old phrase, reimagining the whole status quo, the whole normal, that word that we're not allowed to use, and asking yourself, and actually putting this into the mix when you've actually got your team together, this co-working, co-collaborative organizational setup, actually embrace the what if. Say, okay, guys, what if we had limitless budget? This idea, this problem, this challenge that we're going to face, what if budget was not an issue? Give me some answers, give me some ideas, take budget out of the equation. What if there were no time restrictions? Remember, everybody's saying that they're busy. In fact, actually, I'll let you into a secret. Everybody's got 24 hours in every day. It's how you choose to prioritize those 24 hours. The word busy is an excuse. There, I said it. It's controversial, it's contentious, but you know I'm right. So if there were no time restrictions, if we prioritized that this was an important project to do, what if? If there was nothing that was going to call our time away and the phone was going to ring and the email was going to go, what if? What could we achieve? This is how the organizations who reimagine stuff, those who have flexible creative cultures, this is how they operate. This is how they live and breathe. They don't restrict themselves by time. Yes, the idea you come up with might not make it to the management team's table to be, committed to resource, but it was given a chance. If you shoot it down too early in the process by limiting it, oh, we can't do that. We've never done it like that. We haven't got the resource. We haven't got the time to do it. You've had that negative bias come to the forefront. That ego is cut in and you are lost before you start. So I love the what if question. People do challenge me on that one. It's like, yeah, come on, Neil, you can push yourself a little bit harder. Come on, you're consulting with us. Come on, give me some answers. So then I always go back to them. Okay, well, let's take out the limitations. Let's just do the what if. So have a little play with that one. So as much as you are not using the word normal, business as usual, or busy, maybe bring in the what if question, because that could be a real trigger and a real key to changing that culture that you're seeing around you. And also the fourth point, I mean, we've looked at the sort of the big three there, but the fourth one could be actually just doing the inverse of what you've done before. Because typically, if you were going to go into a meeting where you've been given a brief, and the brief is, we need to launch this new product or service. Can you just go away and sort it? You're going to say, okay, well, what is the new service? When's it expected? Who are we going to serve? When will they buy it? When's it going to be launched? How about asking the inverse of those questions? Creativity and new ideas don't come from asking the same old questions, but if you ask new questions, maybe the inverse of what? So in other words, well, what isn't the new service? When will it be experienced? Well, when won't it be experienced? When are they going to buy it? Well, when won't they buy it? And see if that opens up some new perspectives, because by turning everything through 180 degrees and looking back in from a different angle, you might be very surprised what you see. There's no point in asking the same questions and expecting a different answer. But if you turn those questions on their head, the likelihood is you probably won't get a different exciting opportunity from each question, but maybe just one will be that trigger. to change everything. So this is all about kind of being a little bit more flexible, being a little bit more creative, but also it makes you more agile. It gives you the opportunity to make choices. Deepak Chopra, one of the great sort of holistic and philosophical thinkers, says that you and I are essentially infinite choice makers. In every moment of our existence, we're in that field of all possibilities where we have access to an infinity of choices. The trouble is, if we keep asking the same questions, we never open ourselves up to those choices because we can't even see that they're there. So we've got to turn stuff around. So I would recommend you never use those 3 languages again that I talked about, but that you actually start to think about asking the opposite question to the question that you would normally ask. Test it, because it will give you a very, very different perspective. And it is about a different mind shift. It is about a different kind of mindset. McKinsey Consultancy have done a lot of work on this, and it's a really interesting one. And it is about kind of how you position the people around you to do this. Okay, so again, talking to the leaders here, people need to be directed and managed, otherwise they won't know what to do and they'll look out for themselves. There will be chaos, is the old business paradigm if you don't lead them. New business paradigm says, and this is how to create this kind of agile, flexible culture, it says that when given clear responsibility and authority, in other words, putting the onus on them, people will be highly engaged and inspired, and they'll take care of each other, collaborate and co-create, and they'll figure out ingenious solutions, innovation, and will deliver exceptional results. And why? Because they care. So this isn't just me saying that this stuff works. This is, big global consultancies who have done years and years of research. And it's all based around an organization being seen as a living organism, a living, breathing thing. It's a collaborative environment, not a structure like a machine. There are many, many models. You can search the McKinsey Agile Business Model to find out more detail on this if you want to try this with your team, or if you're in a leadership role within your organization. It's really important. You cannot deliver all the things that we're talking about here by doing it in the same way and having the same processes and the same approach. You've got to change those bits first before the magic begins. So Agile business focuses on people as a living organism and as an entity of an environment of people interacting and collaborating, not on the structure itself. And of course, that is where the co-working really begins to score dividends for you. And of course, as we talk about this kind of business model in terms of people, it does apply right across the organization. You can do this, obviously, with people. You can restructure. You can set up these new style business meetings, these new kind of idea and opportunity generating Zoom calls and whatever else you want to be doing there from a people perspective. But it also requires you to revisit your strategy, your goals, your targets. It inquires of your leadership as to actually whether they are supporting, as we say, from below or from above, and are there opportunities to be made there. And it also, as we said a little bit earlier, requires you to look at your processes. You need to create the time and the space for doing this stuff. If you think you're just going to sort of squeeze it into a busy, remember I use the word again, you're not allowed to after this call, busy day, then it isn't going to happen. This is about an investment where you see that moment, you see that opportunity for doing something just slightly differently. And you have this little sense inside you that you think, if we were to explore this, there just might be something different. And an agile business, those businesses, and if you work in one, and I know probably one or two of you actually here probably do, you will know the benefit. Where you're working very, very flexibly, you have an opportunity here to do what are called sprints. Some organizations who have got very well established agile business principles, they do sprints. So in other words, everybody combines together just for a moment to see if there's an opportunity. And then if it does, it flies, they sprint at it. So they don't try and weigh it down with heavyweight process. They just make it happen. That is the definition really of an agile business. So building a culture around this whole idea of creative innovation and agility means that we need to bust through those original barriers that block innovation. So I would implore you to try here and kind of redefine how you generate new ideas, how you approach your team meetings, how you position your leadership versus the teams around you, how you think about that word innovation in itself, and start to ask those questions from an opposite perspective. It's not just me saying it. This is Harvard saying it. That was McKinsey saying it. There are so many practitioners of this and organizations who make great gains in doing this. But ultimately, doing this company-wide requires a different role of leadership. HBR, Harvard Business Review, say that at nimble organizations, those that are truly agile, leadership is flipped upside down, and the job of the leader is to serve the people who are close to the market. But you can do this individually. Even in a very junior role, you can introduce this idea and do the what if. You can do it at your next team meeting or the next meeting you have with your line manager. Just introduce this idea and say, look, we've heard there might be some opportunities actually within the business that we're not tapping into. And I've got some ideas and some tools. I heard these on a webinar once. And actually, could we just have a little game? Could we play? Could we have a Zoom call? Could we get a few people together and explore some of these ideas? Could we do the what if and just see what happens? And if leadership says, okay, you can have an hour to do that, you've at least made those initial gains and you've started the whole process of becoming more agile and flexible and creative. And remember, everything does begin with you. Yes, if you're not in a leadership role, it's going to take time. But if you don't make a start, it might never begin in your organization. And remember that feeling your way through this stuff, feeling your way through flexibility and creativity and becoming more agile is so much more than thinking from the mind. You'll know when this feels right. You'll know when you're working from the heart. And when you start to introduce some of these ideas into the business, it can still be commercial. There's quite a few people, and I'm sure some of you will be listening to this and thinking, hold on, we're in a really serious business here. We've got to think from the mind. We can't be doing all this woolly heart stuff. Well, trust me, that is where the magic happens. And I've seen this over decades of working with some very serious businesses in maybe law firms and manufacturing, where they traditionally would be very, very serious and very, very principally driven by old school paradigms and processes. The instant they become more feeling and operating intuitively from the heart, their commercials, their numbers go through the roof. This is the new way of doing business. This is the new way to become agile, flexible, and creative. Take out that language that we said we'd never cover again. Open up the opportunity to innovate and be flexible by asking those questions from a different perspective and explore the what if. Don't limit yourself from doing the things in the way that you've always done them, because that in itself is going to be a limit to how you're going to progress, both professionally and also personally. And remember that thinking can be commercial. So when we come on to the next session, I'm going to open up the chat for the last sort of 10 minutes or so in just a moment with Lauren's help. But remember, the next one that we have on the 1st of October is commercial thinking. Maybe from that last slide, we need to move it to commercial feeling. But I am going to come at this one from the numbers, the financials, the return on investment that your business needs. And we're going to match together some of these amazing flexibility and creativity options and the kind of the softer elements of marketing with some of the hard, real kind of business-centric ideas that your business kind of really wants to get from you. So we're going to blend those two things together. This is where the numbers meet the subjective stuff. And that's where, if we can blend those two, really, really powerful things will happen. And that whole balanced scorecard that I've talked about in professionalism, in marketing, and a couple of other times, that's where it starts to become the tool that allows you to really drive professional marketing forward. So these are exciting times. But for now, I just want to leave you with that thought about flexibility and creativity. Ask those questions. The what if, that's absolutely key. So, Lauren, if you want to sort of ask anyone if they have any questions at all, or if they have any observations, or if they've seen some of this stuff work. It would be lovely to hear. And we will take any questions that anybody might have. So one of the questions that's come through is, how can I balance return on investment with all of this? And that's a really sort of interesting one. And I guess really in lots of ways, I'm going to be covering that in the commercial thinking, or in brackets, I'm going to probably change it, commercial thinking stroke feeling, in the next session. But I think for now, yeah, I mean, the word investment, I've played with the word investment for quite some time. And one of the key things for me, sort of in that whole phrase, return on investment, is that you want to see some kind of something coming out of it. I think as you make your early gains in maybe some of the early kind of meetings that you have, I think it would be well worth just documenting what happens, because I think it's unlikely you're going to see a direct ROI, return on investment, from sort of the early meetings that you have, using, you know, the whole concept of co-creation and collaboration and sharing of stuff. But I think as long as you document it, as long as you've got a little bit about the process and how you've spent your time, it will become clearer as you get a little bit deeper into it. And as you identify that first great idea, and it will come, might not be the very first session, but as you start to get people sort of used to it, it almost becomes a little bit of a habit, or it's maybe a Friday lunchtime session that you have with everybody to kind of really instill this. As long as you've been logging it, you'll be able to then backtrack all the way upstream and actually see where it came from. And that's where the baseline of your ROI measure could come from. So it's a bit of a tricky one to answer that one, but I think that, you know, by logging it, I think that's going to be really helpful. We've just had a question through saying, I'm now in a managerial role and would like to share this session with one of my team, if that would be okay. 100%, absolutely, yeah, please do. So I'm going to be sort of releasing this one as a podcast. There's a little bit of a promotional podcast for this particular webinar series, but yes, please do. And if you contact us, I can send you a PDF, if you like, if that would be helpful, of these slides. So yeah, very happy to do that. Another question that's come through, which is very interesting session, lots of valuable takeaways. Thank you very much. How would you see some of this thinking work with systems like EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System? Yeah, I think, I mean, everything like this really has been, it's an amalgamation. I think what we've tried to cover over the last sort of 45 minutes or so kind of really sort of sits in line with that. The whole kind of ethos of something like EOS really sits at the heart of this. I think it is about, for me, it's about really opening up the balance of kind of new ideas with a real kind of focus on goals and objectives. I think it's very, very difficult if you're kind of leading a system, or you're the sort of the owner of the system, or the admin of a system or process like that, to say, okay, I'll just take any of the innovative ideas, and everybody sits there thinking, well, okay, sounds really nice, but I don't know where to start. I think it is about seeding the right kind of focus and questions. So maybe initially focus on a particular goal. Maybe start by focusing on a particular challenge that you have. Maybe begin with a particular sort of element of a product or service that you want to improve. Maybe there's some limitations to something that you're doing right now. So keep it really, really focused. And I think that's where this stuff's going to work really well with your system. I think if you do have an existing system or process, and this applies to everybody else, is, you know, really focusing on kind of, you know, where are the quick gains, the quick wins? Because just the word innovation, if I just throw that out there and say, hey, go and innovate, it's like, oh, I don't know, where on earth do I start? So that you're already quite familiar with, I think that would be a very good one. in terms of doing that. Yeah, so begin there, really. Existing processes, existing challenges, and use some of these principles kind of within that and this thinking to maybe just structuring those initial meetings to talk about it. Another one says, I feel it would open up our team meetings more and encourage engagement. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Thanks for sort of mentioning that, Abby. I think this is important to kind of get used to this stuff. I mean, there's lots of ideas I've kind of thrown at you there, and there's obviously within a session like this is very short and it's very punchy. So, we haven't got a lot of time to kind of dwell on these things. So I think maybe just little and often, I think, is the key thing. So if you do have, existing meetings with your team, or if you're the recipient of a team meeting and somebody else organizes it, is maybe just use one of those little techniques and just introduce it one by one. Don't try and do all of this stuff at once. There's a lot of really good stuff you can get out of just literally using one tool. The one that I use above all the things that I've covered in here is the filter, the must, should, could. I spend a lot of time when I'm mentoring or when I'm with clients just using that must, should, could filter, because it really strips out all the stuff that you should and could be doing, but actually really focuses you down on the must. And then within the must category, if you've got 5 or 6 things, you can then filter those down again by now, soon, and later. So, you can then just get a priority or a hierarchy of what's important. So even just introducing something like that when you're in a team meeting can be really, really powerful. So yeah, I'd encourage you, little and often, start with one and you can build it up. This stuff isn't going to go away. A lot of the principles we've talked about here have come to the fore in recent months because of the changes that we're all going through, but they are well documented and they're very, very well established. So they're not going anywhere. They're not brand new as such. They've just been reinvented for this current scenario that we're all in. So thank you for those questions. They're really good, really nice to get that sort of positive support as well. So, of course, you can contact us through sort of email and social media. You can go back to Lauren at marketingcollege.com if you need copies of the recordings, and she'll be able to send those through to you. Thank you, Lauren, for doing that. And the next one obviously is on the 1st of October. You can book in at marketingcollege.com/events. And as always, very, very pleased to see you on the podcast. So that's both the Cambridge Marketing College podcast and the Neil Wilkins podcast. And for those of you who I haven't met before, thank you very much for coming along, and do connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter. Other social networks are available at Neil Wilkins X. I look forward to connecting with you then. So thank you very much. And I'll just reiterate what Lauren has just said in the chat. Thank you very much for coming along today. Hopefully you found that useful, and I look forward to seeing you, fingers crossed, and all being well, on the 1st of October for Commercial Thinking. Thanks very much. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch up with you again soon.